So hello everyone, thank you again for this warm welcome. My name is Bianca Fox. I work at Nottingham Trent University in the UK, and together with scholars and researchers from the University of Bucharest, we have worked together on this project that I have today the opportunity to talk to you about. Now, building on what previous speakers have said, and particularly the speaker just before me who was talking about skills and how do we build those new skills that journalists need. My presentation today is basically going to focus on the audience and how the audience is perceiving AI generated news and how the audience makes sense of AI generated news. So we all know that recently questions about whether AI will replace journalists have become louder and have kind of started to dominate not only the academic discourse, but also the discourse in the media industry. And we all know that journalism has been through so many changes over the years. I mean, I remember starting my work as starting my first job as a journalist, which was probably 20 years ago. And I have to say that the industry, it was just so different to what it is today. So if you've ever practiced journalism, but even as an observer, if you haven't practiced journalism, you can tell that the industry itself has been through so many changes. Again, now with the rise of automated and personalized stories and computing assistant reporting, journalism is further redefining its practices. It's basically a new way in which journalism is being reshaped. Let me just do this. So with this in mind, we started a research project at the end of last year. So this is basically a COVID project, if you want to call it that way. We started by examining the existing research around artificial intelligence in journalism, around how what changes journalists have had to do as a result of the rise of AI generated software. So far, existing research on artificial intelligence in journalism has focused more on understanding and explaining what artificial intelligence means for the future of the profession. Again, like our previous speaker, the research has focused a lot on what does the journalist of the future look like, what skills journalists will need in the future, as well as outlining the potential impact of artificial intelligence in newsrooms, like from newsroom practices to newsroom roles and cost implications. At the same time, there is a body of research that analyzes the changes in journalistic routine, but there is far less research on how the audience perceives the use of AI-assisted technology in news production and dissemination. So our project aims to kind of correct this oversight and attempts to refocus scholarly efforts on the audience and its understanding of artificial intelligence and software-generated news. For those of you who are familiar with research that has been done so far, published so far on AI in journalism, you will see that the research is kind of split. It's still in embryonic phase, and it appears to be dominated by contrasting views and slightly inconsistent results. So on one hand, we have the skeptics, the ones who describe artificial intelligence as the biggest threat to the profession, because they believe that the potential of internet giants to become more powerful than government is a real threat to modern societies. And they believe that this is now possible with the help of AI algorithms. On the other hand, we have the scholars that are less skeptical about artificial intelligence and what it means and its impact on journalism and journalistic practices. And they explore the potential of AI tools to improve journalistic outputs. And these are the scholars that claim that despite the unlimited potential and despite the threats that some see in these tools. These tools also are not likely to supersede journalists. They're not likely to replace journalists. We will still have journalists in the future. Of course, they will need a different set of skills. Of course, they will need more training on how to understand machine learning and how to work maybe with artificial intelligence in order to improve the work that they're doing. But at the same time, we can't really say that journalists are going to be replaced. And for those of you who are passionate about media history, if we go back in time and we think about you know, the history of media and a time when radio was new, was a new medium, and debates at the time were saying that, you know, radio is going to take over. We're not going to have newspapers anymore. And then again, this discussion was kind of in a way replicated when television became very popular. I still remember reading so many studies who at the time were claiming that television is the future and it will replace all the other platforms, which obviously has not happened. So there are many scholars still that believe that this is not going to happen in the case of artificial intelligence either. But we will learn how to use artificial intelligence. We will learn how to live with it. We will learn how to make the most of it, if you want. Now, what I want to focus today, though, is a different branch of studies to the ones I've just mentioned. And a branch of studies that has focused on the way the audience experience news produced by artificial intelligence-driven tools. And this branch of studies, this branch of research, again, has had mixed results. And I've listed a few here because these are the main scholars and main studies that we kind of used as a framework for our own research. So you will see when you start reading about how the audience is experiencing news produced by AI-driven tools, that there are scholars who have kind of come up with a typology, with a way in which they use several dimensions to kind of encourage people to compare AI-generated news to news written by a real journalist, by a person. And we have Mellin et al., for example, who used 4 different dimensions to ask readers and viewers to evaluate news produced by a news automated system called Valtteri. The result found that the audience was less appreciative of the artificial intelligence generated news stories. They were in a way trusting more the news that were written by a real journalist. We find this result again in other studies, like in Clewell's study or Wu's study, which is the most recent one. But I'm not gonna dwell too much on this because I don't want to go into too much detail. It's just I wanted to give you an overview of the studies that have been conducted so far on audience perception of artificial intelligence generated news. And I wanted to tell you what we've done different after all. How is our study different? Well, whilst our paper kind of continues the line of inquiry on how the audience experience and perceive automated news selection and software generated news, we started from these theoretical frameworks, but what we did, opposed to these authors, was to avoid giving people a prescriptive list of dimensions, if you want. We wanted to avoid giving them a prescribed list of types or a prescribed lens through which to evaluate and compare AI-generated news stories. Instead, we allowed them to come up with their own system of evaluating these stories, to come up with their own dimensions to compare people-generated news versus AI-generated news stories. So this is kind of how the project started. So we explore in this project people's experience with predictive news and AI generated news articles. But we are doing this through the participants' personal experience story. So with this in mind, obviously, we started the research from 3 research questions. So first of all, we wanted to find out how news consumers experience the use of algorithms in determining their own personalized news agenda. Then we wanted to find out how do news consumers perceive AI-generated news stories. And last but not least, we wanted to know what is the audience attitude towards AI-driven tools, and particularly towards AI-driven tools being used in news production and distribution. How do they feel about that? Do they know when this happens? Are they able to tell which news stories are written by a real journalist and which news stories are generated by artificial intelligence? And how do they make this distinction? As a methodology, obviously, we chose grounded theory. So it's a qualitative exploratory study. It's in essence a qualitative study. So we conducted 22 semi-structured interviews at the end of last year. Obviously, because of COVID, these interviews had to be conducted online. But you know, on the bright side, it meant that we were not restricted to a particular country. So our interviewees were from across Europe, with some actually from across the world. We had participants from Mexico, we had participants from South Asia. So in a way, the COVID crisis has helped our research, if you want, because it hasn't restricted us to one particular country and to just analyzing the situation of people from one particular country. Right, with this in mind, because I know I have little time today, I thought I would just show you some of the results that we got from conducting this research. So the first significant result, if you want, was the fact that we noticed a concern amongst the participants regarding the possibility of living in one's own news bubble, if you want. So what our participants were telling us was that based on the algorithm selection of the automated selection of news, they sometimes feel like they are living in a news bubble, like they only have access to particular news stories that are generated and are recommended to them by algorithms. And this is something that kind of came through our discussions with the participants. And you can see here what some of them have said. And we thought this was quite interesting, because at the same time, we had, I think, two or three participants who said that actually I welcome this automated selection of news stories that I get every time I have a look on social media. That's because it kind of saves me time, and I don't actually have to look for those news stories. They're there already for me to just click on. So the attitude towards this is, and the understanding of this and the preference, as you can see, is quite different. But most of the participants kind of saw this process as being quite intrusive, and as giving them the impression that they live in a news bubble. Now, others have said that this automated news selection also kind of raises privacy issues for them, because they feel like they're being watched. They feel like someone is constantly watching what news stories they are clicking on, and based on that, someone or something is recommending similar news stories for them to read. And some of our participants said that, you know, I know that one day I'm interested in sports, but maybe tomorrow I'm not interested in sports. Maybe tomorrow I want to know more about the latest developments in politics, or I want to know the result of the election, or I want to know something else, or I want to find out more about, I don't know, history, or about technology, or about anything else. I don't have just one particular interest. I'm not just interested in one single thing. I don't want to see stories just on one single topic. Now, interestingly, when we asked them to kind of tell us a word that for them describes artificial intelligence, most of them said that they associate artificial intelligence with the word evolution. They see it as being something new, evolutionary, innovative. But you will see from this word cloud that some of them also perceive artificial intelligence and artificial intelligence tools as being scary or unimaginative, or as representing a threat or danger, and as being very cold because of that lack of not necessarily just transparency, but also that lack of emotion, if you want. And interestingly, some of them associate artificial intelligence with control, with being controlled, which we again thought it was very interesting. Now, just to give you an indication of how we actually measured this and how we came up with the typology that I'm going to present to you in a few seconds, we asked our participants to read 2 news articles and try to compare them and try to analyze them and try to identify who wrote which article. So we basically asked them to tell us, who do you think wrote this article? Was it a real journalist, or do you think it was generated by a software?
Bianca, I'm so sorry to interrupt.
No worries. I'm just going to go straight to the end.
Could you please wrap up?
Yes.
So we will for sure discuss at the end. Thank you.
Thanks so much. Of course. Last thing I want to share with you is probably the most important result of this research, which is the criteria used by the participants to compare these articles that I just showed you. And you can see here a list of criteria that they used to compare and to kind of gauge if an article was written by a real journalist or by a software. In conclusion, what we kind of got from this research and from analyzing the semi-structured interview was that people generally want more transparency. They want to know who wrote that news story that they are reading. They are interested in knowing that, and more than that, they want to know that that's a real person with opinions, with feelings, with thoughts. So we kind of notice a newly found respect for the journalistic profession, and in a way more trust in journalists, if you want. And apart from that, probably again something that is quite interesting is the fact that our participants, contrary to existing findings, did not perceive AI-generated news stories as being more objective, credible, or less bias orientated, which I think it's something that, you know, it's worth mentioning. All right, thank you so much. Sorry for sorry if this was too long, but I'm very much looking forward to your questions at the end. Thank you.